Hello everyone, my name is John Bussard. I'm an HPE Business Transformation Center engineer for Ingram Micro. I help support HPE servers, blade system storage, as well as Aruba networking technology solutions. In my videos, what I like to do is show you a slide from a popular PowerPoint and then demonstrate to you what that means with the management context. Today we're going to talk about HPE's Infosight in relation to a dHCI solution. Now Infosight certainly works across all the solutions that are across the bottom of this slide, and it's as long as you have current support on these solutions, you can be able to utilize this. It is a cloud-based resource. The only thing I would say aside from that is HPE servers. You're allowed to use this without support as long as you have Gen 8 or newer servers. You can pass up information. But overall, as long as you have support. Now, what is Infosight? What does it do for you? Well, it's a cloud-based analytic tool that you can use across your systems. And I definitely think a demonstration is going to help explain this a lot better. But you'll hear the marketing material call this your big data in your cloud, your AI in the cloud. I think the term I like to use is cross-stack analytics. So the basic idea is all these technologies, they create local islands of data on them. So for example, a Nimble storage system will collect information about are the power supply spinning, what's the temperature of the spinning, what's the wear like on the drives, the redundancy level, how are individual volumes performing, things like that, right? And if we look at HPE servers, each ILO interface is doing something along the same thing. It's collecting information about itself as well. You know, are the fans spinning? What's the RAID level like in the system? What's the temperature like in different spots? What's the wear gauge in the SSD drives? All those things. And again, it's collecting that locally. And we can also look at our other solutions that are out there, something like VMware, something like an ESX server. It's collecting its own metrics inside the environment. You know, is HA kicked off? Is DRS kicked off? What's the performance like of individual virtual machines? Are you using memory balloon drivers and things like that, right? And they're all kind of creating their own islands of data. What Infosight strives to be is an aggregator of this information, and they'll put their analytics on it and give it back to you in a meaningful fashion. Infosight also allows them to look at other solutions across board and make decisions based on that. So one thing, this is a cloud-based resource. You can certainly opt out of it. I don't think you'll want to, but you certainly could. But none of your important information, none of your database, your spreadsheets, or things like that are going to be put up in cloud. It's just metrics about your systems and your solutions that are out there and get passed up to the cloud. And it allows you to be able to do some great analytics across this. Now, some things that are kind of nice about this solution is the support that you'll get out of this. Now, on an old Nimble array, I've had a drive fail, and because the log files and everything are already up on HPE's support site, right, they can look at that and they can immediately send out a drive. So there's no calling up support or anything like that, opening up cases or anything like that. I've had drives automatically get sent to me without you know, intervention from or talking to support at all. Every once in a while they'll check to make sure that I'm still the contact and my mailing address is correct. But you know, for the most part, they'll send things out. They can also look to see if a firmware upgrade that maybe is one across globally has had a certain impact on certain software sets that are out there. So maybe somebody's using an old version of VMware, maybe 6.0 or something. They could see that an update that they pushed out had an impact on it, and they can hold that back from other things. So there's a variety of benefits we can have by using AI up in the cloud to be able to utilize this. But I think the most meaningful impact is the way you can get information about your environment. So with all that being said, let's look inside this cloud-based resource. All right, we're up here on Infosight. You can see it's infosight.hpe.com. I've already logged into the environment, and we're actually in a Nimble context of this environment. So like a lot of things with dHCI and Nimble, there's a lot of things that have existed on ProLiant servers as well as Nimble storage that get brought on over into dHCI, but they added extra benefits in the environment to offer more value add into your infrastructure. What I'm going to show you off in the beginning is what you get out of Infosight with Nimble and HPE servers, but then again I'll show you the special value adds that they have wrapped around the dHCI environment. So we're looking at the dashboard for our Nimble solutions. We can see that we have all our Nimble storage solutions over here. As a matter of fact, this is the dHCI systems solution that I've been using on some of the demonstrations here. Some of the other things that we can see, if I scroll down a little bit, we can see the systems that are out there, the heartbeat. We can see the protection level. This would be replication or snapshots, and that's reflected down here. We can also see any capacity issues that might be happening. If I scroll up a little bit more, we can see over here top VMs from I/O as well as latency. Now everything on here is clickable. So for example, we'll take a look at this one view incident. I'll click on that. It changes our context. Now we're in a VMware context and we're looking at information about this virtual machine. But we'll come back and we'll look at this in a little bit. I'm going to go back on over to our operational dashboard, which is where we were. All right, and some other things we can see are recommended actions. So this is something that's a little bit new inside this environment. It gives you some information to know. It'll give you good rocks to look under in order to be able to solve issues within your environment. Let me see some things over here. This will be holistic across the environment, but you'll see these recommended actions pop up on the different pages as you go on. That'll be specific to the context that we're looking at. But right now, it's pretty much the same list that we see over here under recommended actions. And there's some interesting things to look at. Virtual CPU under provisioned. Virtual CPU under provision. If I go down a little bit more, we can see some other things. We can see elevated latency on this data store that we might need to look into. Some information about that one view incident that I was looking at. Right, so a variety of great information or recommended actions that we'll get out over here. We can also look at the executive dashboard here. Now in the executive dashboard, we can look at different things like our space savings in here. So this is kind of interesting. Now they measure things in gigabytes and terabytes. There is a little bit of a difference between the two of them, but they're pretty close. We could see that the world thinks I've got 16 gigabytes available to it, but what I am saving is a little less than 5 due to compression, a little less than 2 due to clone savings, and a little less than 5 due to deduplication. So what I'm actually using on my backend storage is about 4.5 gigabytes. All right, so this is my actual reduction ratio, and I can take this to the bank. This is what my environment is seeing and what I can expect to see in the future if nothing crazy happens within the environment. If I scroll down a little bit more, we'll see some data protection information. So we can see recovery point objectives. When have I taken my last snapshot, or when have I done my last replication? You can see somewhere in an hour, somewhere in a day, somewhere unscheduled, and we can see that based on the application that I selected for the volume. Go down a little bit further, we can see how long I'm hanging on to these snapshots of these replications. Some of mine are 30 days, some of them are 5 weeks, some of them are 16 weeks, and again, that's divided up by actual application categories. And finally, we'll look at disaster recovery. So I'm doing mostly local snapshots in my environment, but I am replicating a little bit. I do show some demonstrations around replication, so that's what we're seeing here. So we can also export this if we felt like it. Next on the list, we'll look at wellness. So wellness is any outstanding actions that we need to look into. We can also configure what we view inside this environment, set different thresholds. Next, we'll look at capacity. So this is the capacity of our storage solutions in our environment of all the pools that we have. And we can scroll down a little bit and we can see the individual pools. So if you remember, pools are grouping together of Nimble arrays. I have pools of one array inside my environment. So these are all kind of individual arrays, or one array and one pool. But we can look at these based on the applications that I chose. So you can see I've got some virtual desktops, some virtual servers, as well as file servers listed here. And I can also look at based on volumes as well. Right, we get a listing of volumes, and I can click on these, right, and it'll bring us over into a volume context. You can see we're in a different context, and we can get more detailed information. But again, we'll kind of look at that in a little bit. So again, we were in capacity dashboard here, right, and then we could look at Aruba Labs. These are things that they're thinking about bringing into Infosight. You can kick the tires on them if you choose to do so. Some of the most recent things I've seen them add is some of the planning information over here. These used to be a part of Aruba Labs that they've added in, but these are some handy things. Sizing, dHCI sizing tool, as well as a backup sizing tool in here. So that's kind of nice. All right, so that would be the dashboards that we'd see over here. From operational down to capacity. Let's take a look at the array information itself. So first we'll start off at pools. So you got pools, arrays, as well as volumes. So we can see some information about these. You also want to always look up here to see if there's any different ways you can slice and dice this. So I can look at individual pools if I wanted to limit this down. But we'll take our dHCI pool down here. So I'm going to select that. All right, and we get some more great information out here, capacity, performance. These little wrenches here tell me when I did firmware update. And again, we could tell that this wrench has had an interesting effect as far as CPU saturation in this environment. Right, so that's a quick way to be able to tell. Also, this is information that gets passed up to Infosight and HP, and they can tell their effect on their software across the globe. So a lot of times people release firmware updates, right, and they think it's going to have an impact on their environment, but they don't really understand that because they don't know the real life use cases on that, right? But in this case, HP is collecting all this, and they'll be able to see this right away. You can also see my capacity usage down here, not only what I'm using today, but what I'm expected to use in the future based on my trends. Right? And we're in an overview tab, but certainly we could look at this based on performance. Notice we could see some recommended actions over here, but we get a little bit more detail on performance. IOPS, CPU utilization, cache hits, latency, as well as throughput inside the environment. And again, there's a specific one to capacity as well. And notice we could choose a time range. I've been leaving mine at 3 months. But again, we can see the storage that we're using today and what we're expected to use in the future. All right, now we can look at the individual arrays themselves. Right, again, here's our arrays. Right, again, I could look over here to see if there's any way I could filter this down. Again, I can just filter it down by individual. We'll take this array because, again, this is our dHCI solution that we have. Right, we can see some information, capacity, hardware status, monitoring services. Is there any hardware recommendations? It might let us know if we need to add some more storage. Any software recommendations would show up here, as well as I've just got the one head unit, but if there's any additional shelves, you'd see those down here. I could also click on this manage button, and it will launch the on-site management for the array. You can see that it's going to bring this up, and I don't have a certificate on this array, but I'll move forward, and we'll see that we can actually log into this. Right, and there we go. We got the context to log in. I'm not going to log in right now, but I think you get the picture. And again, that was a local resource. Again, it doesn't have access. Infosight doesn't have access to your local resource. It just gives you kind of a jump-off way to bring up that context. All right, next we could look at volumes. See all the volumes that are inside the environment. And again, up here, we could take and limit this down. So if I just want to look at the volumes that are on our dHCI group, select that, and these are just the volumes that exist here. And we can slice and dice, look at based on space, performance, protection. Right? We could look at maybe capacity trends inside this environment. Again, it's going to make us select a more detailed entity here. Again, we'll select our dHCI group. And then these are our volumes, and we can see their capacity trends over time. We can drop this down. We can look at volume performance contention. Again, it's for the same pool up here. And if we go down here, we can see top volumes by activity. We see all the individual volumes over here. The darker the color, the more activity it has. Go down here, we can see volume by latency. And again, not much latency on this one. There's not much going on in this array right now. Right, but those are the things that we can look at over here under volumes. So next, we're going to be looking at the VMware side of things. So if I select over here, we can look down here and we will see VMware, and I can expand this out and we can see the menuing over here. I'm going to select data centers. You notice that menuing kind of expanded out over here. Now there's not much going on here. We can see my individual data centers. These links will bring us across over here. I think it's a little bit more interesting to go directly over to clusters. And we can see our cluster information right away. We can see these red lines that are showing up. So there's something going on with this ESX host. Looks like there's a lot of CPU, but it looks like we're running into a little bit of memory contention over here. If I select this ESX host, it brings us over to the ESX contest. So we moved away from clusters. And we get a little bit of information about this host performance. Right? But I could look up here real quick and I could tell it's my memory usage. Looks like I'm hitting a little bit of swap, but I'm not hitting a balloon memory driver. So I think I'm okay right now, but I better start looking into getting some more memory for this host. So that's completely evident to me real quick within this context. Next, we'll look at the data stores, and this is from the VMware perspective on our data stores. And we can see all the data stores that are in our environment. Again, we could filter these down. So again, I'm going to filter this down by the dHCI environment, and these are all the data stores that are part of this environment. And I can actually click on one of these. So why don't we take this one right here, this dHCI data store 1. And we can see the VMFS type, its version, block size, usage, capacity. I scroll down, we can see latency, IOPS, and throughput of this. So that's all handy information as well. We can change it over to capacity, see what my capacity utilization has been like. Looks like something happened here. All right, next we'll move over into VMs. So these are the virtual machines that are running inside this environment. And again, I could select individual clusters if I wanted to. So we'll select this data center, dHCI data center cluster, and we'd see all those virtual machines. Now, different ways we can slice and dice this information. So we could look at VM capacity trend. Again, we're going to need to select the data store. So I'll select this dHCI data store one that we've been looking at. And we can certainly see that something happened right here as far as my capacity utilization. And that would be the introduction of this big VM1. So this is a 1 terabyte virtual machine that I created in here in order to be able to create a little bit of metrics within this environment. But I could clearly see how the data center is getting utilized, or the data store is getting utilized. We could also look at contention tree maps. Again, I'm going to need to select a vCenter environment. All right, so this would be the individual data stores, and these little smaller blocks within these data stores are the virtual machines. So if I select over here, maybe I'm interested in this box because it's the biggest and it seems to be the darkest shade of red. I will go into that data store, and now we can see all the virtual machines that exist, and I can highlight that. And if I want to click on this, it'll bring me over the virtual machine context for this virtual machine in particular. All right, so that would be like going over here to virtual machines. All right, and we'll limit down by the dHCI data center. All right, and then here should be that vCenter incident, which is right here. So I'm going to select that right now. We're going to go into this virtual machine. We can see the virtual CPU count, the memory count, the capacity utilization, average IOPS, average latency, lots of great information here. Right? Again, latency, IOPS, and throughput over time. Right? We could look at capacity over time. Right? And then we could look at the individual VMDK. So obviously a vCenter server has a bunch of virtual hard drives that are attached to it. In this case, looks like there's about 16 of them. But I could select one of these and get metrics about individual virtual hard drives. So we'll just select the first one. All right, we can see the VMFS type, configuration, version, block size, right, and again, performance, latency, IOPS, and throughput, all the way down to the individual hard drive, including capacity information. So when they say cross-stack analytics, this is what I see as a good term as far as this solution is concerned, because not only can we look at the individual virtual hard drives, we can look at the entire virtual machine. We can look at the performance of the ESX cluster, the data store that virtual machine sits on, the whole data center if we wanted to, and then we can look at it from the storage side. We can look at the individual volumes. We could look at the array and then the grouping of arrays together in the pool if we wanted to. So this is what they mean by cross-stack analytics. You get a holistic view of what's going on inside your environment. All this metrics that have been pulled up from these individual solutions have been centralized in this environment, and it provides you great information to be able to look into your environment and keep it healthy. Now, we've been looking at everything that's related with Nimble. I know we've been pulling out a lot of the stuff on the dHCI system, but this comes with, everything you've seen so far comes with a Nimble-based solution. So I'm going to kind of look at other solutions that exist, and there's a bunch of them that we have inside this environment. And we can go up here. You can see we have servers. Looks like we have the Altera-based system, so Primera 3-part store server, as well as the Altera 6000, SimpliVity. We're going to go into servers. We're going to take a look at that. So these will be our ProLiant servers in this environment. We can see they're mostly healthy. We can see the power status. We can see the connectivity. So now we're looking at the information that ILO passes up to Infosight. We can also see down here the warranty support status. All right, so I have some expiring warranties down here. And if I click on this red portion of this circle, it'll give me a list of warranties that I need to update within my environment. So that would be very important to do. All right, so let's go back on over. And we'll go back to operational dashboard here. All right, we can also dig into the wellness of this solution. So again, these are any outstanding things that I might need to look into, and I can configure that if I felt like it, as well as reports. So I have a little bit of work to do here. So you can see there's some hot fixes as well as service pack for ProLiant I need to be able to deploy inside this environment. If I select the orange here, we can see the systems that are not compliant, and I can go through and update those to whatever mechanism that I have. So let's go back to the operational dashboard, and let's look at our healthy systems. Let's pick out a system and look into that. We're going to take a look at this Optane system up here. So I'm going to select that serial number. All right, and then we can see all kinds of great information that ILO is kind of passing up. This is an overview page. Right, we can see all the hardware is doing well, the heartbeat's kind of going on through. We can look at any wellness alerts that might be outstanding for the system. Event logs from the ILO interface, whether the integrated IML or just regular ILO event logs. We can look at server hardware. Right, we can go right across the board, and I love this. Here we go. We got the system board. We've got part numbers. We can see the processors that are installed. We can look at the memory, and this system's got, not only the memory, but what slot it's installed in. For example, this 32 gig stick up here is just a regular RDRAM. But if I go down one, right, I've got some persistent memory inside, so Intel persistent Optane memory installed in this. Right, so you get great detail, including part numbers and things like that. So that's great information. Power supplies, including part numbers, network connectivity, right? Array controllers, as well as what's connected to the array controller. I've got a couple of SSD drives connected to this guy. And all kinds of things, firmware and software installed. Have there been any case histories on this system? Any customer advisories? A whole bunch of things that we could look at in this environment. So that's kind of the server context. Right, and this is our operational dashboard, our quick view into what's going on. Now that's on the server side of things. Again, HPE gives Infosight 4 servers, for free as long as you have Gen 8 or newer systems in there. And I'd say it's a great way to keep track of warranty information as well as the wellness of your environment. Now, the next thing I'm going to look at is kind of the grouping together of everything we've seen so far in the dHCI management context within Infosight. So if I go back up to the top up here, I'm going to go to my little menu down here, and I'm going to select the Nimble Storage dHCI. All right, and we can see our cluster up here. We can see the utilization overall of all the hosts that have in the environment, the CPU utilization, as well as the memory utilization and storage capacity. Now, if I click inside here, it brings you up some similar views of what I've seen elsewhere. So virtualization, look at this cluster. We could see the CPU utilization and memory utilization. Looks like my memory utilization's on the rise. I can see my top virtual machines in the environment, average latency, which systems are being affected the most by that. We can see my compute utilization, my overall memory utilization, as well as storage utilization down here. And this is clickable. So for example, if I want to look at the servers and the server context, all right, so this would be the server plane. If I select one of these serial numbers, this looks very similar to what we were looking at before. And now you can see that we're under the server context. So now we'll go over back to dHCI. We'll go back into our cluster. Right, but we can dig into other areas if you wanted to. For example, the top VMs. So here's that vCenter that we were looking at before. And again, we could bring up the metrics on that. So a lot of easy ways to get into information that you need about your environment. When you're looking at something that's historically been happening with the infrastructure, this is a great place to start and look at. Say, I don't know, 2 o'clock every day, there is latency within your environment. You don't understand why. This would be a great place to look at and to understand where that latency is. So Infosight, it's your cross-stack analytics within the cloud, comes with your HPE solutions, no additional licensing. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and please stay tuned for more videos.